Pollination. You know that pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma. So, self pollination and cross pollination you are already familiar with. Now, related to self pollination is autogamy. Autogamy is actually self pollination. In some of the flowers like Viola, Oxalis, and Cormeline. Okay, here we find that there are two categories of flowers they are formed for self pollination. These are cosmogamous flowers. In cosmogamous flowers, the exposed stigma and anthers they are there, and which results in assured seed sets. So these are completely autogamous or self pollination occurs in them, and there are some kind of flowers which are cleistogamous which do not open at all. Now, gytinogamy, it is also called as cross pollination. Now, you must have noticed that cross pollination when occurs in the same plant, okay, that is called as gytinogamy. Now, pollen grains they come from the same plant, so that is why they are genetically similar. This also requires pollinating agents, wind, insects, etc. Now, xenogamy. Xenogamy is a cross pollination where the different plant pollen grains they settle from on a different plant. Here the variations they do occur because they are genetically different. Now the agents of pollination are further of two types, abiotic and biotic. Now in abiotic we find that wind and water pollinating agents are there. Here it is a chance factor because pollen grains might not settle on the stigma or fertilization may not occur. So that is why large number of pollen grains they are produced. Whereas in biotic factors we'll be studying about animals and other.
Good morning, students. Good morning, students. Let's revise what we did last week. Now, we've discussed about pollination and the various kinds of flowers which undergoes pollination. Flowers undergo pollination by different means. Now, wind pollinated flowers are there. They are called as anemophilous flowers. Now, wind pollination is a type of abiotic pollination. Now, pollen grains of this type they are light, they are non-sticky, they are transported by wind, and they have well exposed stamens. Why they have well exposed stamens? Because the pollen grains they can be easily dispersed. They have large feathery stigma. Why they have large feathery stigma? Because they can easily trap airborne pollen grains. They have a single ovule, and most of the flowers they are combined together in the form of an inflorescence. For example, corn cob, bhutta जिसे हम कहते हैं, छल्ली, they have tassels, and all they have is all these tassels या उनके जो बाले होते हैं, ठीक है, small hair structures which are present, they are generally are the stigma and the style. They are to trap the pollen grains. Other examples are grasses. Pollination by water, that is also called as hydrophily. It's a rare type of pollination, and mostly monocots they undergo water pollination. Now, water is a mode of transport for the male gametes in algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, etc. For example, water pollinated plants. Water pollinated plants they are Vallisneria and Hydrilla. Hydrilla and Vallisneria, they both have freshwater plants. Some are marine sea grasses like Zostera. These are also the examples of water pollinated plants. Water hyacinth and water lily. Here flowers, they emerge above the water and they are pollinated by insects and winds. Whereas in Vallisneria, the female flower, they reach the surface of the water by a stalk, and male flowers they are released onto the stigma surface of the water, and the pollen they are carried by water currents, and some of them they reach the stigma to achieve the pollination. Now in most in most cases the pollen grains they are protected from wetting by the mucilaginous covering. So this is a special feature in the water pollination. Here the both wind and water pollinated flowers they are not very colorful and they do not produce nectar. So what would be the reason behind this? because they do not have to attract the insects, and their pollens are very lightweight and they are carried by the wind or by water. Various pollinating agents which brings about pollination in the flowers. These can be animals, bees, butterflies, flies, beetles, wasps, ants, moths, birds, sunbirds and hummingbirds and bats also. Now bees, they are generally dominant in bringing about the pollination. Now, these are also considered as the biotic pollinating agents, as they all are living organisms. Animals. In animals, we find that primates, lemurs, and arboreal, these are tree dwelling, rodents, reptiles, gecko lizard, garden lizard, they all bring about pollination in the flowers. Now, in the insect pollinated flowers, they are also called as entomophilous flowers or entomophily. I've sent you a video where all these kinds of flowers they are being shown in the videos. They are large, they are colorful, fragrant, rich in nectar. Why? Because they have to attract the insects or all these biotic agents. Now their number of flowers are combined together to form the inflorescence. Flies and bees, they are attracted to the foul odors. So some of the flowers they do not smell good, they do have a foul odor because they have to attract the flies and bees which are attracted to foul odor. Now nectar and pollen grains, these are the floral rewards. So all these biotic agents they bring about pollination, and how do the flowers reward them? By giving them nectar and pollen grains. Amorphophilus, its flower is 6 feet in height, and this flower rewards in providing safe place to lay eggs. Okay, some of the bees they lay eggs in these kinds of flowers, so flower is providing the reward by providing a safe place for these insects to lay the eggs. Another example is moth and yucca plant. They cannot complete their life cycle without each other. How? Because moth deposits its eggs in the locule of the ovary of the flower, and flower gets pollinated by moth. And the larvae of the moth they comes out of the egg as the seed starts to develop. So this is how these relationships explain how the pollination and the flower reward is explained. Now, in most of the examples, we can see in cucumber, mango, people, coriander, papaya, honeybees, wasps, moth, they bring about pollination. In onion, lobia, cotton, tobacco, rose, and lemon, these are again flies, bees, uh, hawk moth, butterflies, bees, hummingbirds. Okay, they all bring about pollination. Now, pollen or nectar robbers. There are some cases we find that robberies going on. How? Some of the insects they consume the pollen and the nectar also from the flowers, but they don't bring about pollination. So such type of insects they are also considered as pollen or nectar robbers. Now the last topic for today is outbreeding devices. Now we know that continued self-pollination again and again in the species of the flowers results in inbreeding depression. Now what is inbreeding depression? That their fertility is reduced, and outbreeding devices that the nature has adapted such methods so that these outbreeding devices help the organisms to increase the chances of variations, because continued self pollination results in inbreeding depression. So that is why self pollination needs to be discouraged and cross pollination needs to be encouraged. Now there are 4 methods we'll be studying here, which are the outbreeding devices according to the NCERT book. Now the first is pollen release and stigma receptivity, that is not synchronized. That means either the pollens are released before the stigma becomes receptive, or stigma becomes receptive much before the pollen is released. Now because of these two conditions, the pollen release and stigma receptivity is not synchronized or asynchronized, we can say. Now in some species, anther and stigma they are placed at different positions, and the pollen cannot contact stigma of the same flower of the same plant. So that will reduce the self pollination. Now first 2 methods they help in preventing the autogamy, and it encourages cross pollination. Now third, to prevent inbreeding is self incompatibility. That means sometimes the genetic mechanism prevents the self pollen from the same flower or the other flower of the same plant from fertilizing the ovules by inhibiting pollen germination or pollen tubes in pistil. So, this method, which is also called as self incompatibility, doesn't allow the fertilizing of the ovule. Now, fourth and the last outbreeding device is production of the unisexual flowers. We know that male and female flowers, they are in the same plant in castor and maize, so they are monoecious and they prevent autogamy, but not gytenogamy. Now in papaya, it is dioecious, where male and female flowers, they are in the different plant. So this prevents both autogamy as well as gytenogamy. So it encourages cross pollination, encourages the chances of variations, and the continuing of the generations of the organisms, generally angiosperms
Pollen
flowers.
pistil interaction. Now we know that pollination assists transfer of the required pollen grain from anthers to the receptive surface of the carbon. Now further development, that is germination of the pollen grains on the stigma and growth of the pollen tube through the style upon the embryo sac, needs favorable physical and chemical condition. It depends on the favorable pollen pistil interaction. Now, only the compatible pollen of the same species as the stigma of the pollen of the other species, they are self incompatible. Now, pistil recognizes the compatible pollen or incompatible pollen. So, only the compatible pollens they are able to germinate in the pistils, not incompatible pollen. Now, what is compatible pollen of the same species? It promotes forced fertilization events which leads to fertilization. Now, the angiosperm pollen grains, they have exine, which is composed of sporopollenin, which we have discussed previously, and the cavities present in the exine layer, they are filled with specific proteins, mainly enzymes. Now, enzymes, glycoproteins, lipids, certain allergens derived, they all are present in the, derived from the tapetum during sporogenesis. Now these chemicals, they are mostly derived from tapetum and they carry some specific recognition factors, whereas the intine, so these are present in exine, and intine of the pollen grain consists of proteins, polysaccharides of haploid spores. Now they are therefore gametophytic in origin, and the stigmas of some of the form of the free floating secretions. Now the dry stigmas and wet stigmas. Now wet stigmas possess proteins, amino acids and lipids in the form of free floating secretions, and the dry stigmas on the other hand possess the hydrated layer of proteins, carbohydrates and lipids. And the chemicals, they are also of sporophytic origin. So pollens, when they settle on stigma, they germinate and the pollen tube through the germ pores. And the chemical components of the pollen, so what are these pollens? So what are these chemicals? They are actually exine and intine, they both produce different types of chemicals. So once they settle on the stigma recognizes the pollen and it is compatible pollen, then it starts germinating, give rise to the pollen tube grows through the style and reaches the ovary. Now further course of action will be studying in the next week. They are shed at two cell stage, where the vegetative and generative cell, they are present. Generative cell actually divides and form two male gametes. Now some of the pollen grains which are shed at three cell stage, the pollen tube carries two male gametes right from the beginning. So pollen tube enters through the micropylar end, and synergids, we know that they have filiform apparatus to guide the pollen tube. Now pollen grains, when they settle on the stigma, give rise to the pollen tube. Pollen tube enters through the micropylar end. It contains two male gametes. Now pollen pistil interaction, all events from the pollen deposition on the stigma until the pollen tube enters the ovule, these are all the events. So this is called as pollen pistil interaction. These are all the events right when the pollen settle on the stigma until the time the pollen tube is formed. Now this knowledge helped the plant breeders to get the desired hybrids, and there's an experiment we'll be doing in the lab, how the pollen grains, they germinate various pollen grains of peas, chickpea, crotalaria,
balsam, vincia, they are put in a sugar solution, 10% of the sugar solution, a drop off, and then they do germinate and we can see them under the microscope. Now plant breeders, they cross different species or genera to combine desirable characteristics to produce commercially superior varieties. Now double fertilization will be studying in the next video. Post fertilization events. Now endosperm. Now endosperm development precedes the embryo development. Why? Because endosperm will be providing the nutrition. Now pre-endospermic cell, so that is formed, that first divides, and then it will give rise to a triploid endosperm tissue because it contains the reserve food material and providing nourishment to the developing embryo. Now endospermic nucleus, it undergoes successive nuclear divisions, gives rise to free nuclei, and free nuclear endosperm is formed. Later on, the cell wall formation occurs and then it becomes cellular. Now, coconut water. What is coconut water? It is actually the free nuclear endosperm where thousands of nuclei are there, whereas the white kernel of the coconut is the cellular endosperm. Now, endosperm is sometimes completely consumed by the developing embryo, for example, in pea, groundnuts, and beans before the seed matures. And in some cases, the endosperm persists in the mature seeds, like in castor and coconut, which is used in seed germination. Double fertilization. Double fertilization is a special phenomenon that happens in angiosperm plants. We know that pollen tube, when reaches the micropylar end, it already has two male gametes. Now one of the male gamete fuses with the egg cell or the ovum, the nucleus of the ovum, and this process is called as syngamy. It results in the formation of a diploid cell which will later on give rise to zygote, and zygote will form embryo. Embryo will give rise to the future plant. Whereas the second male gamete, it fuses with the two polar nuclei or the central cell of the embryo sac and will give rise to a triploid endospermic nucleus, which is triploid, 3N. And this is called as primary endosperm nucleus or primary endosperm cell later on formed, and this will give rise to the endosperm. Endosperm gives nourishment to the developing embryo. Now, there are two fusions in this kind of fertilization. First is syngamy, where the male gamete fuses with the egg cell, and second is triple fusion, where the second male gamete fuses with the two polar nuclei. So that is why two fertilizations are involved. So such kind of fertilization in angiosperms is called as double fertilization. Embryo develops at the micropylar end of the embryo sac, and in most cases the zygote divides only after the endosperm is formed to provide the nutrition. Now the development of the embryo is known as embryogeny, and it is similar in monocots and dicots in their earlier stages. Now zygote gives rise to proembryo. Proembryo will further develop and form a globular heart-shaped mature embryo. Now embryo develops from the zygote at the micropylar end of the embryo sac, and nutrition for the development is provided by the endosperm, and zygote gives rise to proembryo, which will further develop into a globular heart-shaped mature embryo. Now these are the diagrams given in your NCERT book of a typical dicot embryo, which consists of epicotyle, plumule, embryonal axis, cotyledons, hypocotyle, radicle, and root cap. And this is the diagram of a typical monocot embryo, the grasses family. Generally, it also consists of the parts which further gives rise to root system and the shoot system. They are covered by the membranous sheath, like here in coleotile. In the shoot apex, that is covered with the coleotile, whereas the root apex or the root cap, that is covered with the membranous flap, that is called as coleorhiza, which is an undifferentiated sheath. Rest of the parts, they are similar. You already know cotyledons, this is the scutellum part, and epicotyle part is related to the development of the shoot apex, and hypocotyle part is related to the development of the root apex. Embryogeny in dicots. The zygote undergoes transverse division, forming a large basal cell and a small apical or the terminal cell. Now you can see here, after the fertilization takes place, the zygote which is diploid and the primary endosperm nucleus which is triploid, which later on form primary endospermic cell. These are the degenerating and antipodal cells at the lower end. So zygote divides further and gives rise to a small apical or terminal cell, and there is a large basal cell. The large basal cell undergoes transverse divisions. Uh, it undergoes transverse divisions, and then it form a group of 6 to 10 cells, which later on called as suspensor. The first cell of the suspensor towards the micropylar end is called as haustorium, whereas the last cell of the suspensor, that is towards the callosal end, that is called as hypophysis, which later develops into the radicle. Now this is the structure of the globular embryo. The smaller terminal or apical cell undergoes one vertical division, and then the two cells formed from the terminal cell divides by transverse division, thus forming four embryonal cells, which is called as the quadrant stage. Finally, the four cells keeps dividing vertically terminally, forming 8 cells proembryo or the octate stage, and the four cells at the apex gives rise to the plumule, and the another gives rise to the radicle. Hypocotyle, which later on forms the radicle. So this is the structure of a typical dicotyledonous embryo, where the plumule gives rise to the future shoot system, radicle gives rise to the future root system, which is formed from the epicotyle and the hypocotyle. Let's go to the structure of the monocot embryo in detail. A typical monocotyledonous embryo consists of one cotyledon, and the cotyledon is situated on one side or the lateral side of the embryonal axis. Now the radicle and the root cap are situated at the lower end of the embryonal axis in an undifferentiated sheath that is called as coleorhiza. The shoot apex and the few leaf primordia, they are enclosed in the hollow structure in the epicotyle region that is called as coleotile. Now the portion of the embryonal axis above the level of the attachment of the scutellum, that is called as epicotyle. And in the grass, banana, bamboo, palm, etc., these are some of the monocot plants. Seed is the final product of the sexual reproduction in the angiospermic plants. It's a fertilized ovule. It is formed inside the fruits, and it consists of seed, coats, cotyledon, and the embryonal axis. Now, cotyledons, they actually store the reserve food material. Seeds are of two types depending on the retaining of the endosperm or not. They are albuminous, which retain a part of the endosperm and it is not completely consumed during the embryo development. For example, in wheat, maize, barley, and castor. Whereas non-albuminous, which have no residual endosperm, and because it is consumed completely. For example, in peas and groundnuts. Now, in black pepper, beet, there is a remains of the nucellus which remain persistent as a residual, and this persistent nucellus, that is called as perisperm in such cases. Now, integuments, they get hardened and they form a tough protective seed coat. Micropyle remains as a pore in the seed coat. It allows the exchange of gases as well as water, which are taken up by the seeds during germination. Now, as seed mature, it dries up. 10 to 15% of the moisture is reduced by mass, and the metabolism slows down. So they undergo the period of dormancy. And when the favorable conditions returns, moisture, oxygen, temperature, they are available, they undergoes germination. Now, ovary, we know that gives rise to the fruits, ovules form the seeds, and the wall of the ovary gives rise to the wall of the fruit, which is also called as the pericarp. And fruits can be fleshy or dry. Fruits. We know that ovary matures to form the fruit, and the ovary wall develops into the wall of the fruit, that is called as pericarp. Now, fruits can further be two types, that is false and true. False fruits, where the fruit develops from the any other part that like the thalamus of the flower, whereas the true fruits, they develops from the ovary. So fruits can be fleshy or dry. Fruits like fleshy orange, mango, etc., and dry can be like mustard and groundnut. Now, peas, wheat, and maize. Peas, wheat, and maize, they are the examples of true fruit, whereas in the false fruit category, we know that fruit develops from ovary and the thalamus or any other part of the flower, like in apple and strawberry or in cashew nuts. Now fruits they sometimes develop without fertilization also, and such type of fruits are called as parthenocarpic fruits, for example banana. Now parthenocarpy can also be induced with the help of growth hormones, and that may result in the seedless fruits also. Advantages of seeds. Now seeds they have many advantages. Now seeds possess better adaptive strategies for dispersal to form to the new colony. Now the reserve food of the seed support the growth of the seedlings till they become nutritionally independent. Now the hard seed coat, protection of the embryo. The hard seed coats like the tester and the tegmen, they provide protection against the injury. They also provide genetic recombination, new genetic recombinations and variations, as they are the products of sexual reproduction. They are the basis of agriculture. Seeds they are stored to be consumed throughout the year, and they can overcome drought and natural calamities. Now dehydration and dormancy results in we use them as fruits throughout the year. Seeds viability varies from different species. In different species, Lupinus arcticus, given in your NCERT, it has got 10,000 years of dormancy. Phoenix dactylifera, that is a date palm, it has got 2,000 years of dormancy. And the King Herod's palace near Dead Sea it is found. Now orchids, they have thousands of seeds, and so is the case with the orobranche and stage. Now today we are starting with the last topic of this chapter, apomixis and polyembryony. Apomixis, it is a special mechanism to produce the seeds without fertilization, for example in Asteraceae and grasses family. Now it is a phenomenon of asexual reproduction that initiates sexual reproduction by the formation of seed without fertilization. Now there are different ways of forming the apomictic seeds. Now what is fruit production without fertilization called? That is apomixis. Now apomixis is a type of asexual reproduction that mimics sexual reproduction. Now in some cases the diploid egg cell is formed without reduction division and develops into embryo without fertilization, like in citrus and mango. Here the nucellar cells they start dividing and protrude into the embryo sac and develops into embryo, and each ovule contain many embryos, and the occurrence of more than one embryo in a seed is called as polyembryony. Now the role of hybrids, they are extensively cultivated, they increase productivity, and the seeds to be produced every year. And apomictic hybrids, formation of them, it is costly for the farmers, and there is a segregation of the hybrid characters also takes place. So if we transfer apomictic genes in hybrid varieties, so no segregation of characters in hybrids will occur, and the seeds needs not to be bought every year by the farmer. So apomictic hybrids, okay, if such type of genes they are transferred in the hybrid varieties, then there will be no segregation of characters, and seeds needs not to be brought again and again.